The agenda this week considered a more conservative Canada, gauged the strength of the NRA of the North, and followed the push to encourage First Nations voting. The agenda's week in review begins with a prescription for trouble. Is this an epidemic right now?
It is. It is for sure.
Even in small cities and towns in Ontario?
Yes, yes. Our fentanyl death rate is 4.5 times the provincial rate, which is shocking. As bad as it is across the province, like I've stated, and even across Canada, we have 4.5 times the rate. We have the same number of fentanyl deaths as a larger city like London would have, which is 3 times the population that we have. So there's a very high amount of concern that we have as, not only on behalf of Sarnia Police, but all the partners that are involved in trying to tackle this issue.
Tara and Michael, let me get you now to join our discussion, and I want to start with you where we finished up with Mike and with Dan. Do you think this is an epidemic across the province of Ontario, what we're talking about tonight?
Yes, I absolutely do. Some of the work that we've done and really echoes what Dan and Mike have already said, and that this is a huge issue that's been rising over the past 2 decades across the province. But also when we look at the individual counties and regions, we see huge differences in the rates of prescribing, the rates of people going to hospital with an overdose, and the rates of deaths from overdoses. And it's really difficult to try and understand what's driving that. Is it proximity to the border? Is it, the typical age range of people? Some different areas might have more older people versus younger people living in the regions. Or is it something else? Is it that there are certain prescribers in some regions who are more comfortable prescribing these? Or might we even hear some concerning stories of prescribers who are involved in over-prescribing these intentionally for the purposes of diversion? And so you can have just a couple of
Just explain what that over-prescribing for diversion means.
So writing a large number of prescriptions for patients that they know are going to be then turned around and sold on the street, and perhaps getting paid for that service.
I don't mean to sound naive, but pharmacists do this.
Prescribers,
doctors do this.
There have been some cases of this, and I mean, you probably know better than I do, but in the work I've done, I've heard from different police services who have said, yes, this happens, and it can be the prescriber, it can be the pharmacist, it could be a combination of the two working together with people, and you probably know this better than I do.
I believe there was a Barrie family physician or a doctor that got caught up in this diversion of fentanyl, and is going to jail for a number of years, I believe. And these were huge amounts of prescriptions that were being written. I believe the value was somewhere close to $400,000 worth of this prescription drug that was being diverted onto the street.
Just to get a sense of that, if you buy a typical prescription, pills in a bottle, how much does that cost?
Very little, especially if you're covered under a drug benefit plan.
So 400 grand's a lot.
Absolutely.
Okay. Can I get to you, Michael, on that issue about whether or not in your travels you see this as an epidemic?
Well, it's been described as a leading public health and safety concern. It's been described as a public health crisis. Whether it's an epidemic, I don't know. We lose 1 person every 14 hours in Ontario to an opioid-related overdose. If that's not a crisis, then I think we need to redefine what a crisis really is.
We lose meaning someone dies?
Someone dies every 14 hours in Ontario using 2013 data. So in total, that's 625 people across Ontario in 2013. That's up 463% since 2000. That's almost 5,000 dead Ontarians. And many of those deaths were absolutely preventable, and many of them, as Mike said, started in a physician's office. But before they got to the physician, they were approved by regulators, and they were approved by provinces and the federal government on their drug formulary plans. And here we are. I often think from a crime prevention perspective, what would happen if we dumped billions of dollars worth of pharmaceutical grade heroin through trusted health providers into a largely unsuspecting public? Like, what could go wrong? And
everything.
Everything could go wrong. And we have the knowledge now and the data through the good work in Ontario from Tara and other researchers. We know enough to know better.
Here's, apropos of the numbers you just said, Sheldon, let's bring up this bar graph here because we happen to have this standing by. Ontario opioid-related deaths going back to the year 2010 up to 2013, which is the latest year for which statistics are available, up and up and up and up. And I don't suspect we have any reason to assume that over the last couple of years this chart is going to continue to go up, right?
No, I mean, it's It's been rising. I would expect it would continue to rise. Opioid prescribing has leveled off a little bit, but I mean, the concern is high-dose opioid prescribing. So like fentanyl, like oxycodone, that is up. And so what's interesting about those numbers, like those 2010 to 2013, it's about a 20% rise in opioid overdose deaths. For the same period, there's been a decline in self-reported opioid misuse. So I think we really need to ask ourselves, what's driving opioid overdose deaths? What's driving other indicators of mortality, like addiction treatment and emergency room admissions and visits? And many people who are smarter than me would suggest that it's people using as prescribed that is driving this epidemic. That we often focus on, that stereotypical notion of a junkie in the street, and it allows us to, in the main, pass moral judgment on people's character and be dismissive of services. I think we really need to look at people who are using exactly as they're prescribed by their physicians, particularly people who are getting mental health medications like antidepressants or sedatives, and start to reduce the deaths attributable in those circumstances as well.
Acetaminophen essentially is what?
Tylenol. That's what most people associate it with.
So it's Tylenol. Any other brand names we should be aware of?
Well, what people don't realize is that acetaminophen is in more than 480 products sold in Canada. So therein lies the problem.
Because?
Because people will basically take too much acetaminophen without realizing it. And this is easier done than you would think. For instance, say you have a cold and you're taking extra strength Tylenol and you take up to the max that they suggest you do in a day, which is 8. If at the end of the day you drink a neocitrin, you've already gone over the daily limit.
Because there's acetaminophen in that.
Because there's acetaminophen in neocitrin.
And people don't know that.
Exactly. And then say you take a NyQuil too to help you sleep, and then you've really gone over the limit. And you're sick for a week, and you do this day by day, you can get into some real serious trouble.
And you can't figure out why you're getting sicker when you're taking all this good medicine.
Exactly.
Do you need a prescription to get acetaminophen?
You don't. And in fact, there's also acetaminophen combined with codeine called Tylenol 1, or the generic versions of this drug, which you also don't need a prescription to buy in Canada.
How is it possible that 68 people a year are dying from this?
Well, some of those are intentional deaths for sure. Tylenol and acetaminophen tend to be something people reach for when they're suicidal or intentionally wanting to overdose. But coroners have found that nearly half of these deaths are unintentional. So they are people who are accidentally what we call double dipping acetaminophen by combining all sorts of products and not realizing that they all contain acetaminophen and thereby blowing the limit. Or they are people who are more susceptible to overdose. And this is something that isn't widely known either, is that people who are alcoholics, have liver problems, who might be malnourished, are more susceptible to overdosing on acetaminophen.
Jennifer, if this is as clearly concerning as it is, how come we don't know about this?
It's kind of interesting. I think because acetaminophen and Tylenol has been around for so long, it's a really old drug. And there are some drug safety experts who think that if it were introduced today, it probably would be a prescription painkiller. But I think just because it is so common, and that's worth noting, more than 4 billion doses in Canada are taken every year, and the vast majority of those are taken safely. And it does have a reputation for safety, so I think people have kind of been lulled into a state of complacency. But it is interesting. I mean, this new report that we wrote about in the Star recently found an average of 68 Canadians dying every year from acetaminophen. If you can imagine a new drug coming onto the market and a year in, they found 68 people had died from it, whether intentionally or half of them unintentionally. I think that would cause a bit of an uproar. So it's really interesting the way people are sort of regarding this drug and sort of underestimating its risks.
And you said it before, but let's state it again. 8 per day is the limit.
8 extra strength.
Extra strength Tylenol, for example.
Exactly. So 4 grams of acetaminophen is currently the recommended daily limit. But Health Canada and scientists studying this drug actually aren't totally even sure what the daily safe limit is. There is discussion happening at Health Canada right now whether or not to lower that daily limit. In the US, that discussion is happening as well. Some people, there have been cases where people have experienced liver toxicity or injury at doses below 4 grams a day. So it's not sort of a cut and dried limit.
We put out a document called Closing the Gap, which we sent to all the main party leaders. We want a formal response to that. The document speaks to investments in education and training, access to potable water, investments in housing, dealing with the education backlog on post-secondary, looking at language revitalization, looking at an implementation strategy and plan for the Truth and Reconciliation recommendation. So we want a formal response. And we need to see that, and we want to get that formal response out to our First Nations chiefs and leaders across Canada so an informed decision can be made. Which party is really getting it? Which party is starting to make strong policy, program, recommendations and plans as it relates to closing the gap in the document we put forward? So that's where everybody should be leaning towards. Which party is starting to say, yes, we need to make investments now to close the gap in Canada?
I, as you were speaking, was brandishing a copy, if you like, of Closing the Gap, and I've had a chance to look at it. And this is the first line that I want to read back to you. Elections,
Yep.
you say, are really about the hopes and dreams of making lives better. For those seeking election, it is about listening, understanding, and acting. Closing the gap in the quality of life between First Nations and Canada builds a stronger, healthier country for all of us. We need change now. We must close the gap. Okay, a number of questions emerging from that. You have had, when I say you, I mean you and your predecessors for that matter, have often had stormy relationships with the prime ministers and first ministers, premiers of this country. But that is a very hopeful, optimistic tone you've taken in that opening. And I wonder why you chose that tone to open your document with.
Well, basically, again, as prime ministers, as premiers, as leaders, they've got to listen. And the comment, what I'm trying to do with the first line about closing the gap is good for all of us. We've got to listen, we've got to sit down, we have to have a dialogue. And let's put the best strategy and plan going forward and collaboratively and cooperatively work together on joint policy statements, joint programs, and even legislation that will have a positive impact for everybody across this land. And so we have to work with whoever gets elected on October 19 as First Nations people. And we have to make sure that we have access, we have dialogue, but a really respectful and a cooperative working relationship, because the status quo is not working. Maintaining the gap is not good for this country. The gap that I keep continually referring to is according to the United Nations Human Development Index. Canada is rated 6th in terms of quality of life, very high up. But when you apply those same indices to First Nations people, we're 63rd. That's what needs to be addressed, because that gap is not good for our people, it's not good for Canada. And so that gap represents so many things. It represents the high suicide rates amongst our young people. It represents the 40,000 Aboriginal children in foster care. It represents the 1,200 missing murdered Indigenous women and girls. We're 4.3% of the population, but we have 25% of the jails filled by our people. It represents the overcrowded housing. It represents the cap on education funding. It represents the 2% funding cap that's been there for 20 years. So that's the gap that needs to be addressed. And we need to invest now in education and training and in housing, access to potable water, mental health, childcare. That's what has to be addressed, because when that's addressed, we don't only win as First Nations people, Canada as a country will win, because there's a high social cost to maintaining that 6th versus 63rd gap. And that's why we're calling on all Canadians to make sure that they question those potential members of Parliament. We're asking all Canadians to push Mr. Trudeau and Mulcair and Harper and Lisbeth on all these things, that this is good for this country. Make key strategic investments now. That's why we have to close the gap, and that's why I get so excited and so passionate about it, because it's really in the best interests of Canada as a country. It's not acceptable in 2015 to maintain the status quo and this poverty that exists.
Michael, there's a significant chunk of the Conservative base, I think if I read John Ibbitson's book correctly, among a lot of new Canadians.
Yes.
South Asian, for example, communities in the ring of ridings around Toronto.
Right.
Who are social conservative and who may have wanted to see more progress on these issues, and they didn't get it under Stephen Harper, and yet they still like him. How come?
Well, absolutely. Look, the one thing about Stephen Harper that I don't know if a lot of people necessarily understand is he's more than happy for you to have a difference of opinion on issues, but you have to divide it between the personal and the political. You can have your own personal viewpoint on abortion. I mean, if you want to be pro-life, pro-choice, that's completely up to you. But in political terms, the Tories are always in campaign mode, 24/7, which means that they're always thinking ahead about what people want to perceive, what people might vote for for and what would basically be regarded as anathema. So in this case, abortion is an easier thing to actually avoid, even if you have a position one way or the other. And in the end, the social conservatives are going to more naturally continue to gravitate towards you because they don't have anyone else to vote for.
But he even went further than that. And Christopher, let me get you in on this. There were backbench members of this conservative party when they were in government who wanted to speak on abortion, just private members who wanted to put forward private members' bills. We know how often they get passed into law, almost never. And yet, he wouldn't allow that even. Not problematic?
Well, I think it is problematic in a political context where other parties provide an alternative for these voters. But we don't have that in Canada. And in fact, we have exactly the opposite, which is that the Conservatives have maintained a silence on this position at the official levels, at the elite levels, as much silence as they possibly could. And the Liberals, for example, have brought it up again as an issue, expelling pro-life candidates from the party. The Conservatives in that situation have absolutely nothing to gain by sending out pro-life messages. They'll lose supporters for doing that. They have very little to gain. And in the meanwhile, the Liberals have shed virtually all of their social conservative base, which wasn't a huge chunk of their support in, say, even by 2000. But it was still there nonetheless, and by 2004, the best evidence that I've seen suggests it was gone.
Although, in fairness, we should mention that Stephen Woodworth was allowed to speak. I mean, you did have one private member who brought it up for a short period of time. He was allowed to make his comments. They voted it down pretty quickly, the Tories, but that's their way of appeasing the base. What they're saying is, yes, we recognize that obviously it's an important issue for Canadians, much as it is, as you say, for sort of the European model, the BMEs, the blacks, minorities, ethnic vote, which is a very typical strategy used by the UK Tories and various others. We're going to bring these issues forward. We're going to discuss them, but don't expect us to go much further than that. So you're basically giving them a small sop, and that's about it.
I have to disagree a bit with this. First of all, I think that the whip, Gordon O'Connor, did everything he possibly could to suppress the backbench rebellion and to keep them from speaking on, even in member statements, they weren't allowed to speak if the issue was going to be on abortion. And I think, by the way, a sign of a government that's tired and in trouble is it is starting to ignore its base, right? We're not giving them anything on abortion, but we don't have to give them anything on abortion because where are they going to go anyway? Well, staying home is one of the things that they can do. Yeah. And we may be seeing this now. This government in perpetual campaign mode doesn't seem to have the ability to mobilize and expand its base. And it may be that they're paying the price among these social conservatives who just don't, just like George Bush, wondered, what did we actually get out of all this?
Well, the frustration, though, more so, John, is the fiscal conservatives more than the social conservatives. Most SoCons that I've spoken to still seem to be willing to go out there because they're worried about what the alternative is going to be. What are the NDP going to do? What are the Liberals going to do? Is it going to be much worse under them? I mean, obviously, it's a bit of a wild card. We don't know at this point. But I think that, yes, you're right in that sense that they certainly tried to ground it as quickly as they possibly could. But I think Harper himself sort of looked at it as that, look, this is your small moment. This is going to be our discussion, and that's that. Much the same way as gay marriage. He has sort of moved the goalposts past that point because they just don't feel it's right now, it's necessary, even worth discussing or even worth having because most Canadians favor it.
What is this Canadian approach that you like so much?
It's a more humane approach. It basically rests on providing workers with the opportunity to form labor unions without all the obstructions. It's, of course, the full universal health care. It's the unique attention to children, including a monthly check, which I observed my cousins would receive. It includes a...
We should just say you have Canadian cousins, that's what you're referring to.
Yes. It includes Canada viewed as a peacekeeper in the world rather than an acolyte of American military empire adventures. It includes a fresh innovation that Canadians have had without boasting. When I put together this book with two others called Canada First, couldn't find a publisher, Steve, because they said Canadians aren't interested in where they're first, they're too modest. I said, well, that's why we put the book together. And it's amazing what's come out of this country. The first children's theater, first children's hospital, of course, universal health insurance, cooperatives, credit unions were brought to the United States, the first light bulb, the first telephone, the first daily newspaper, the first daily TV radio show. I mean, you can go on in this book, Canada First. And it's just amazing how modest, and when you're modest excessively, as a culture, you begin taking it for granted. And when the counterattack comes, when the corporatists come in and the militarists come in, you're not ready. And I think that's what's happened to Canada in the last decade or so.
Well, you say decade or so. So are you putting this all at the feet of Stephen Harper for the fact it's going the other way?
It started basically about in the late 1980s. The Canadian consensus, as we thought of it, was about 3 decades when even the conservatives and liberals agreed, you know, like on universal health care. I mean, there were skirmishes, but then they agreed. They agreed on pensions. They agreed that workers should have unions. They agreed on a certain nurturing of nature. And they even agreed on providing the Indigenous people of Canada with their own lands, although they have still a lot of poverty and problems.
I went to a baseball game in Detroit this past summer, and it always fascinates me how that little river, which you can basically swim across, still seems pretty big in many respects. The people in Windsor and the people in Detroit, Canada and America, I don't know, to my eyes still seem very different. Are they not as different as they once were in your view?
They're not as different. In fact, there was a poll of young Canadians. They were asked that question, and they said more and more we're looking like Americans. And I think as their tuition goes up at college, as jobs are exported under NAFTA and the World Trade Organization, as they see the two-tiered health system emerge, as they see a lot of American companies just kind of tear apart this social safety net, you know, they sense that something is different, that the traditions of Canada, which go back to some very far-seeing Canadians and the support they had with the public, is changing.
There were people, though, 25 years ago who said when Canada and the United States signed that free trade agreement that the levers of power would all go south, that we would, in essence, be giving up our independence, that we would cease to be an independent country if that deal were signed. Canada still said no to the Iraq War. Canada still says no to the United States in various things. We haven't been subsumed, obviously not completely, but how much at all?
More and more. You can see that they didn't say no to sending Canadian soldiers abroad to bolster U.S. military adventures, for example. They didn't say no to the F-35, which was going to break the Canadian budget, but it's put on the shelf of time being. They didn't say no to the tradition of Canada of not over-policing things. I mean, this new anti-terrorism bill of Prime Minister Harper was described by the Globe and Mail as criminalizing speech, and also, this is quite a memorable phrase, as turning the domestic spy industry into something closely aligned with a secret police. I mean, just those words associated with Canada from a U.S. point of view is just stunning.
Nadine, what inspired you to make this film in particular about this topic?
I started in 2012, just after the Danzig shootings. And so that...
Just explain for people living outside Toronto what that is.
The Danzig shootings was a shooting at a block party where 20 people were shot, 22 shot and 2 died.
In Scarborough?
In Scarborough. And so it was a departure from the level of violence that we'd seen before. There was a lot of talk, a lot of politicians getting involved, and talk of gun bans, which is typically what happens after an incident like that. And then not long after that, there was the Sandy Hook incident. And so I was just looking and listening to the level of discussion, and I didn't really feel like there was a lot of nuance happening or a lot of deeper thinking, which I think you need when you're trying to deal with gun violence, because the causal factors are multiple, it's very complex, and regulation's part of it, but it's not all of the answer.
And just, again, some people will know Sandy Hook by a different name, Newtown, Connecticut, where how many kids at the end of the day were killed?
20.
20 kids
and
killed.
6 teachers.
By a, was he a teenager or 20-year-old?
I think he was 20.
20.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a clip that may help shed a little more amplification on what you've just been talking about, so why don't we run that now? Sheldon, if you wouldn't mind.
And you shot? Never? I love newbies.
Is it a right?
Oh, Canadians are allowed to own guns? We didn't know that.
For a lot of people, that's kind of surprising.
Or a hazard?
They were used in robberies, shootings, homicides, abductions, drug investigations.
We still do lose, young people, far too often innocent bystanders, to gun violence in the city.
The debate over guns in Canada is heating up.
Background checks, background checks, background checks. The people say we need more gun control, and to take our rights away will somehow make them happy.
During a year of increased gun violence, find out where we're going and why.
You can get a gun any way, how, it doesn't even matter. It's so simple.
I don't want my taxpayer dollars wasted on useless legislation.
There's no one thing to do. You have to reduce the demand for firearms.
AJ, so much to unpack there. Of that very short clip, what are the images that jump out at you, that stay with you?
The thing that jumps out at me there is that sign which was at the SHOT Show. Every gun owner must engage in the fight. And that's what these guys are doing, is you have a small number of people who have fairly radical views, and they control the gun lobby. They purport to speak for us all. And I say us all because I'm a shooter, I'm a hunter, and a gun owner. They claim to speak for us all. They go to Ottawa, and they also kind of bully people into line. So you're not allowed to speak out, or you get all these people landing on you saying that you're helping the antis to win. You're letting down the team.
Well, we know how powerful the National Rifle Association is in the United States. Are they trying to kind of replicate the political heft of that organization here in Canada?
They would love to.
They're not there yet.
Oh, they're not nearly there yet because they don't have the membership for it. And there's also 4 different firearms rights groups at the moment.
In Canada?
In Canada, and they're all small, and you know, they aren't joined together.
Why don't they join together? They could have, obviously, a bigger voice if they did.
There are some egos involved, I think.
For more than 20 years, the statistics show Canada has been getting safer. Violent crime is down in both Canada and the U.S., and yet some big city neighborhoods often have the reputation of being dangerous places to hang out after dark. Joining us now to help separate fact from fiction, in Bloomington, Indiana via Skype, Akwasi Owusu-Bempah, Assistant Professor of Criminal Justice at Indiana University. And Akwasi, as I welcome you to the program, we should remind everybody that you did study at the University of Toronto. You have done research on the situation in Toronto. So even though you're a Hoosier right now, you're very familiar with the province of Ontario, right?
I certainly am, yes.
Okay.
And thank you for having me on the show, Steve.
Not at all. It's good to have you here. We played a documentary last night called Up in Arms, which quite clearly demonstrates there is a big disconnect between people who shoot for sport and people who come into contact with guns used for nefarious purposes. The people who shoot for sport see no correlation between gun violence and their perceived right to have a weapon. And I guess let's start with this. Do you see a correlation between gun ownership and crime?
Gun ownership and crime. So I think we can do a few things here and be specific. Let's talk about gun ownership and homicide. Research from the United States, and there's a lot more research on this from the United States, shows a fairly clear link between the prevalence of guns in an area and homicide. That can be at the individual level, so people who own a gun are more likely to be the victim of homicide themselves, at the neighborhood, regional, state, and then also national level too.
So people, I want to be clear, I understand this. People who have a gun in their home, it is empirically proven that they are more likely than people without guns to be the victims of a homicide. Yes, is that what I heard?
That's what you heard. Empirical studies have shown a strong correlation between individual gun ownership and homicide.
If that's true, why do people want to have guns then?
I think there's this misconception that having a gun yourself will keep you more safe. And it's probably this feeling that if I've got a gun, I can protect myself from a bad guy, which the studies show is not the case.
So what is your view on what was clearly demonstrated in this documentary, which is a push by those who like gun ownership for a variety of reasons, for target shooting, for sports, for hunting purposes, their push for increased deregulation around the sale of guns? What's your view on that?
Well, I think that those people that use guns, and it can be either for sport or farmers, for example, might think that there's have a justified reason for having a gun around, whether that be to kill nuisance animals or the like. I don't think we can separate the ownership for sport and practical purposes from the potential for violence. And so we do know in Canada, for example, that handgun shootings and deaths are more prominent now than with long guns, but that hasn't always been the case. And if we look at some very high-profile shootings in Canada recently, the Mounties in the prairies and also on the East Coast recently, both of those police officer-involved shootings, that's shootings of officers, those shootings involved a long gun and not a handgun.
But I wonder if we have to make some distinctions here. For example, if you're a sport shooter and you keep your gun under lock and key and you keep ammunition in a different location altogether, presumably that's a better and safer situation to have in your home rather than you're putting a gun loaded under your pillow every night. Fair to say?
I think that would be fair to say, but the simple access to the fact of the matter is there's still access to that firearm and it can be used in a certain way. And we see here, especially in the United States, there's a very, very strong gun lobby, right? The NRA, many people are familiar with the NRA, who advocate for oftentimes more and more guns, whether that be individual ownership or even after we have these mass shootings in school, they argue for more guns in the schools. And again, this is simply counter to the evidence that we find from empirical studies.
And that is the Agenda's Week in Review. You can see all of those programs in their entirety if you want to. They're on our website, tvo.org, on our iTunes channel, and on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.